Hi and welcome everybody. Today's webinar is titled Scriptless Automated Testing for Enterprise Applications. This webinar is being brought to you by IDEXCEL and Turnkey Solutions. The speakers for our webinar are Venkata Dasari, who's our Director of Testing Services with IDEXCEL, and Steve Rosing, the Director of Pre-Sales Engineering with Turnkey Solutions. In this webinar, you will learn about the importance of automation for enterprise applications and the most efficient way to do automation. A few tips about the platform we are using to deliver this webinar today. Once the presenter starts the webinar, all the phone lines will be put on mute so that we have a clear audio from the presenter. You can ask questions anytime you want on the moderated chat window at the right corner of the screen. And if you miss any part of the webinar, you can visit our website, idexcel.com, and listen to the webinar on demand. Before we start the webinar, I'd like to introduce IDEXCEL and also Turnkey Solutions. IDEXCEL is an IT services company providing cutting-edge technology solutions and testing services to Fortune 500 companies since 1998. We are 600 associates strong and have 10 global delivery locations. We're proud to say that most of our workforce is domain certified, and thus we bring in domain knowledge, technical capabilities, and thought leadership to our client engagements. We are partners with industry-leading technology giants like Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, and HP. We are also partners with leading solution providers such as Turnkey Solutions. And a bit about Turnkey Solutions. They were founded in 1989. And our HP technology partner since 1995. Turnkey helped develop VPT and are one of the only companies with HP OEM resale agreements, which underscores strategic value to global HP ALM customer base. Their automated testing solutions are built exclusively on the industry-leading HP ALM technology stack, and their scriptless automated testing is designed for business users, not just IT, and completely eliminates VB coding and deep QTP skill set requirements. With that, I welcome Venkat to take over and deliver the webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anna. And I would like to welcome and thank you all for joining us for this webinar. A quick agenda for today. We'll quickly talk about the advantages for automation and some of the hiccups that traditional automation tools go through, and generally, what do enterprises expect from automation tools? And then we'll look at the scriptless automation deep dive, and finally, we'll open up the floor for questions. So many of us have been in situations where we want to cover a lot of testing, and there's a lot of regression path to be covered in a short period of time. So in such situations, we look at options like, how do you optimize your testing? Some of them might be going through a risk-based testing approach, or, many of them would be looking at automation kind of approach. So automation does provide options to improve your efficiency, productivity, and predictability. And which helps finally the organization to tremendously optimize their testing time. So automation is important and brings in efficiencies into the testing efforts, but many of the traditional automation tools do have a few hiccups. So a lot of time is actually spent in creating the automation scripts. So if you look at any automation initiative, the biggest chunk of effort that anybody is investing is actually in the script creation period. And all traditional tools predominantly have a unique scripting language or a proprietary scripting language that they use. And the syntax is many times different from standard languages like Java or VB. So if you have to do automation, somebody needs to be having an expertise in this tool. So it's more like training on the automation tools is definitely required to be able to excel using this automation tools. The biggest problem with automation actually comes in maintenance. Some screen changes slightly happen. Somebody has to go back to the automation script and then look through the code and make some changes to the code to make them work. So in spite of all these hiccups, so no one can deny the fact that automation is very important, and it does bring in efficiencies into the testing efforts. So if you look at your automation tool, how do you want your automation tool to function? Generally, you want you to be able to create your scripts with a few clicks and drag and drops, and you would ideally want no coding to be done. Basically, it should be easy for the business analysts and the SMEs to be able to use this tool, and no training is required. So once you understand what the tool does, you should be able to quickly churn out the test cases. And at the end of the day, it should be easy to maintain. Your script should be easy to maintain. So this is quite possible, but it's only possible using Scriptless way. So that's the only way to do easy automation. So if you talk about standard web-based applications, tools like Selenium and any of the other commercial tools that work very well with them. But the story with enterprise class applications like CRM and ERP is a whole lot different. They're a beast, to be true, and their implementation generally takes a couple of years, if not more than that. So usually a lot of customizations are put into these applications, and also quite a lot of functionality is used just out of the box. So the standard functionality that these providers provide, they're just used out of the box. So in ERP implementations, you generally need to do a lot of automation that can help you in quickening your testing cycle. So there are a couple of ways. You should be having a tool that can easily help you to churn out the test automation, and also, it should provide some pre-built test cases for out-of-the-box functionality, so that you don't have to restrict those test cases, which are just out-of-the-box functionality for this enterprise class applications like CRM and ERP. So this is exactly what Turnkey and IDEX will collectively provide. They provide a tremendous value from the tools and services standpoint to help in these situations. So in a moment, my friend Steve will walk us through the scriptless automation philosophy and its value proposition. So you'll see for yourself the value and ease with which the automation can be done on enterprise class applications using this scriptless approach. Over to you, Steve. Steve, can you take control now?
Sure will, and thank you very much. All right, guys. So what we're going to see is I'm going to do just a quick overview here on kind of a visual representation of what we just saw presented, in that everything that's available on the market regarding traditional test automation technology, about 99% of it is based on what's called a record and playback methodology. It really consists of a recorder utility, and what you do, or the way the tools are designed to work, is you fire up the recorder, and then with the recorder running, you exercise the application with the steps that you want automated in the test. The idea being is that the recorder will generate a script for you. Now the funny thing is, this script is really programming. It's just a marketing term for the word programming, because programming tends to scare most people. Most testers are business analysts and subject matter experts, not programmers. That's the whole reason that the recorder was invented. So the idea being is, once you've created these scripts, you can play the scripts back, and you've got an automated test case. Makes it sound really easy. It's like, why doesn't everybody just stick to record and replay? Well, the hiccups that we were talking about is really what I would really call an Achilles heel for traditional test automation, in that what happens is, with record and playback, sorry, I'm just getting a little bit of a slow response on the screens, is the problem with record and playback technology is they don't take into consideration the fact that business processes are complex. Okay, so if we're talking about an enterprise application, there's not one single way to do a business process. For example, when we're talking about a sales order, well, is it with a new customer or a known customer, a new vendor or a known vendor? Do we want to be able to discount it? Do we want to be able to be flexible on delivery dates, billing, what have you? That means every business process has a variety of scenarios that accompany it. So what these screens represent, it's the two forms out of Oracle that support creating a requisition. And depending on the business logic that I'm testing for this requisition, there can be multiple ways that I would fill these screens out. What can happen is, based on whether I'm testing status or approval or routing or purchasing agreements, I could fill out these 10 screens in 100 different ways. So if I'm using a record and playback solution, how do I address this? Well, what I wind up having to do is create a test script or record a script for every one of those business scenarios. So if I've got 20 ways to create a requisition, I need 20 test cases. And guess what? Creating a requisition is just step one in procure to pay. After I create a requisition, I create a PO, I create a delivery document, I create an invoice, and each one of those business processes has got anywhere from half a dozen to 2 dozen different iterations that can be run through. So you can quickly see how a record and replay test tool is going to wind up with hundreds of scripts for a single business process. The other way to address this is, well, if I don't want to record 100 different scripts, I can do it programmatically inside the tool. But guess what you're doing here? You're essentially duplicating the application logic inside of your test case. For all intents and purposes, you're rewriting the application. Does that really make sense? Does it make sense to have to write a program to test a program? And of course, as we know, recorded test cases are fragile. They can only handle what happens during the recording. Any kind of error will cause a recorded script to fail, and the only way to address that is to write code, put in some kind of error handling. So today's automation tools essentially provide you 2 ways to address application complexity. You either record a test for each and every scenario, or you write a bunch of code. This approach is what's been the failing point for automation for so many customers, because these tools eventually create libraries where the maintenance effort becomes too expensive for the budget to maintain. You're either spending more time fixing scripts than creating new ones, or you've essentially adopted a second development center for the same application. We want to get away from this. So what cFactory is, the way to think about it, it's a component or a plug-in for the HP Quality Center tools. So what HP calls ALM, Application Lifecycle Management, that's their Quality Center, Quick Test Pro, or what they now call UFT. cFactory is a plug-in. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to be able to leverage your existing tools. Secondly, it works with any application that's supported by QTP UFT. That means whether you're testing SAP or Oracle or PeopleSoft or Salesforce.com, or if you're testing legacy applications like terminal emulation or custom applications written in Java or .NET. If QTP UFT supports it, cFactory can automate it. And what it provides is an architecture that has the same ease of use as record and replay. Pretty much flip a switch, walk through it, and it creates the components for you. But it doesn't have the scripting redundancy. You're going to see that we don't need 100 different test cases to validate your business logic. And this is because we implement what's called a data-driven architecture. And this data-driven architecture provides all the power and flexibility of a scripted solution, but without the technical overhead. So you're going to get all the power of a scripted test case without having to know how to program. And as we go through the demo, we'll see how that works. Next, it's going to dramatically reduce the time and effort required to not only create, but maintain your automated test cases. Because when you think about it, automated testing is simply a program running a program. And they need to be in sync so that if when you created the test case there were 5 controls on the screen, And the next time you come around and you want to play that test case and there's 7 controls on the screen, or there's now only 2 controls on the screen, those two components need to be in sync, and if they're not, they break. What many people don't realize is that if you've got an application with a 3-year or greater lifespan, 80% of your test effort is spent on maintenance. So anything that we can do to reduce that maintenance overhead is a dramatic ROI for your testing. And of course, it's 100% QTP QC compatible. So if you've already built test cases using Quality Center, QTP, ALM, guess what? You can continue to leverage those existing assets. We're not asking you to rip and replace. What this is, it's an enhancement for the HP environment. So let's take a look at these value props that I've talked about. The first one is the same ease of use. Well, you're going to see in the application, I'm going to show you some graphics and then I'm going to show you the live application, that what we want to do is we want to create a component for every screen in the application that we want to test. How do we do that? You're going to see that we literally click on the screen and cFactory will build these reusable automation components for you. So what are these components? Essentially, think of them as each component represents a screen. So that the example I like to use is iTunes. Everybody's either used it or seen it used. If someone were to ask you, how do I was just given I just bought an iPhone and I want to put music on it. How do I get the music off of iTunes? What would you tell them? You wouldn't talk about iTunes executables and combo boxes and drop downs. You would say, oh, you log into iTunes, you go to the main menu, you select the music store, you select artist and title, you provide payment information, and you download the data. Well, guess what? If I was automating iTunes, I'd have a component for each of those screens. I'd have a component for the login, the main menu, the music store, the artist search, the payment information, and the download. These, as I showed you, are created automatically. Now, I want you to know and understand that these components are not generic. cFactory is an application-aware test accelerator. What that means is inside of cFactory there's what's called a rules base. And in this rules base, we tell cFactory, here is the development platform that we're working on. In other words, is it a Java application? Is it an SAP application? Then we tell it about the customizations that we've done. What kind of third-party widgets have we created? Or, for example, one of the most commonly modified controls in an application is what we see here in this little window, a data grid. People love to mess with data grids. They put drop-downs and pop-ups and links and tree controls and everything into these data grids. Well, guess what? We're going to tell cFactory, this application here is written in Java. We're using a third-party development kit for the interface. The customizations we've done is we've put drop-downs, links, and menus inside of the data grids. And then most importantly, what are our testing requirements? So in other words, what do we want to be able to do when we run across these controls? Do we want to be able to input or validate or check state or what have you? So that when you click on that screen and it creates the component has all of the capabilities you require. So these are not generic components. They're components that are customized to your environment and to your requirements because we can modify the rule space. So what does it look like in real life? I'm going to use just a simple web-based application. The first thing I'm showing you here is we see cFactory on the left and a little drop-down menu. That menu is where we select the rule space, where we tell it, are we working with a Cerner application or Flex or Oracle or is it SAP? Well, we're going to select web because we've got this little web application over here. And I'm now going to create the components. So I've identified the screens that I want to automate. The first one is this one called Flight Finder. I click on it. It says you clicked on Flight Finder Mercury. Is that what you wanted? Yes. Parse it. It thinks about it for a second and it says, here's the components I can build for you. I say, create them. I want to create another screen. I simply navigate to the next screen I want to automate, say, create a component, click on the screen. Once again, it says, is that the screen you meant to click on? Yes, it is. Do you want me to parse it? Yes, I do. Here's the components I can create for you. Great. Go ahead and build them for me. And so I've built 2 components. Let's build one more, just to show you that this is how, literally, how you will do it working through your application. So regardless of whether it's a web application, an Oracle application, an SAP application, as long as that application is supported by QTP, which is actually running in the background, we, or cFactory, can create these components for me. So notice here, in less than 60 seconds, I've created the find a flight, the select a flight, the book a flight. I simply click on the screens that support the business process that I want to automate. And I say save. And these components get saved in Quality Center. So the next thing is, how am I going to build a test with these components? Well, like I said with the iTunes example, I'm simply going to identify here are the screens that I navigate in order to support this process. So for this web application, I say I'm going to log in. I go to the welcome screen and the sold to screen and the bill to and the line items and what have you. Or, if it's in SAP, I could say I log in, I go to the navigation page, I say transaction VA01, transaction VL02, so on and so forth. Each component represents a page, view, or transaction or form in the application. And to show you that that's exactly what it looks like, here I am in Quality Center, and I'm going to say I want to create a test case called Booking a Flight. So I give it a name, I click on Select Components. Here are the components that I created, saved inside of Quality Center. And the first thing I do, remember I mentioned that we are a data-driven application, so the first thing we do is we drag in what's called our data loader, but then we drag in the components that we created for Launch the App, the Welcome Page, the Find a Flight, the Select a Flight, the Book a Flight, so on and so forth. Notice all I'm doing is saying, here's the order of the screens that I'm going to walk through as I perform this application, or as I exercise this application. This is it. My data loader, launch, log in, find a flight, select a flight, book a flight, close the browsers. That's how you create a test case. So I showed you creating the components. I showed you creating the test cases. Did anyone see any kind of VB scripting or any programming at all? No. So now how does this test run? Well, the next thing that I need is the data. So what's going to happen is cFactory and what's called our data driver technology is automatically going to build a formatted Excel spreadsheet or workbook where I'm going to give it the test data. So how do I create these Excel spreadsheets? It's literally this easy. I go to the attachment. The data is stored in Quality Center, so you've got all the visibility rules and control. Excuse me. And so what I'm going to do is, this is a little utility that's part of cFactory where I say, here's the name of the test that I want you to create this spreadsheet for. It takes just a few seconds. I hit refresh. There's the Excel spreadsheet. Let's open it up and take a look at it. You'll notice the Excel spreadsheet has what are called component groups. That's these gray columns separated by these brown bars. And notice, for every component in the test, there's a field in the Excel spreadsheet as well as screenshots. So it says, oh, I'm on the welcome page. I need the username and password. I double click on it. It says, give me username and password. Oh, and the name of the button I want to click, which is a button login. On the next screen, again, I have the screenshots and I have the fields. Excuse me. So you'll notice all I'm doing is filling in this Excel spreadsheet the same way I would fill in the application. I'm not hiding any code in the Excel spreadsheet either. Notice I'm not writing any kind of macros or any kind of, putting code into the screen. What did I do? I gave it the URL. I said I log in using, Joe Brown 123, and that I've got a one-way ticket from Frankfurt to San Francisco. Simply filling in the Excel spreadsheet the same way that I fill in the application. Now, how does that data-driven architecture work? Well, remember what I showed you about I could have a set of screens that may have 100 different ways that I could fill them in. I obviously don't want to create 100 different test cases, and I don't want to write a bunch of programming. How do I manage this? Well, here's what I do. We identify, as I said, here are the screens that support this business process. So these are the requisition screens out of Oracle. It works the same with PeopleSoft and SAP and any other enterprise type application. But here's the screens that support the business process. Now, depending on the business process I'm exercising, whether it's routing or approvals or pricing flexibility or what have you, maybe I'm testing HR and I want to be able to test hiring a full-time and a part-time and a consultant and a flex time. I've got different screens that I'm going to fill in. So I'm simply going to say, I may fill in one, I may fill in all of them, but these are the screens that support this business process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on each of these screens and create a component to represent the screens. And I'm going to drop them into a test case. So I think you're starting to see where I'm going here. This test case knows how to handle any one of these screens. This is where our data driver comes into effect. What the data driver can do is we can take that Excel workbook and put all of our different test scenarios in it. So test scenario 1 can be a requisition and authorization. Test scenario 2 is testing, creating a requisition and price flexibility. Test scenario 3 is testing, creating a requisition and foreign currency. What's going to happen is the data driver is going to read iteration 1 and say, here's the components you're going to work and the pages you're going to navigate. Here's iteration 2, and these are the pages that I need to navigate. So all of that logic that would normally be done programmatically, using if, then, while, and case statements and what have you, all of those programmatic statements are handled automatically. So I get all of the power of a scripted test case without me writing any script or code. I'm simply going to click on the screens to create the components, drag and drop the components into a test case, provide the test data in an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm automated. All the ease of use of a record and replay solution, all of the power of a scripted solution without the programming. Now, once I've got these test cases, what happens when the application changes? Okay, I need to keep these test cases in sync. So what happens after the application is updated or has a bug patch applied to it and components in the application change? Well, cFactory not only generates the components, it updates them. So if this is the screen I'm testing, and here's the component I've been using to create test cases, the screen changes. Well, I need to update the component, but I need to know what happened. I want to know what controls did they add, what controls did they delete. cFactory shows me that. What test cases did affect? cFactory will show me that. And how did it affect my test data? cFactory will show me this, and let me show you how this works. So previously I used an Oracle application. Here's an SAP application. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go open up this component, and in this scenario it was called function location structure. And I open up the component, and this is the component that I've been using to test with. Last time I ran the test, this is where it failed. So I'm going to say update from application. So I'm simply going to click on the screen, and it does that same learn function. It says, here's what, did you mean to click the screen? Do you want me to parse it? Yes. It learns it, and then it says, oh, look at what's changed. These controls in green are new. So they didn't used to exist, now they do. The ones in red have been deleted. Do you want me to update this component? Do you want to accept these changes? Yes. Okay. There. I've updated the component. Here is what the new component looks like. Would you like to save it? Yes. And remember, I can use versioning inside of Quality Center. So I say save it. It says, okay, I've been saved. Would you like to know what this affected? Sure. Here's the test cases that I updated. Would you like to see the test data and how it was affected? Yes, go update that test data. I click OK. Notice I selected supply chain and the spreadsheet function location. So I go to the test case called supply chain function location. I open it up, and it says, here you go. These two fields are now invalid. And if we were to scroll over to the left, we'd see 2 in green that says, and these are 2 new fields. You need to provide data. Now, I should point out this is an empty Excel spreadsheet, but if I had data in this Excel spreadsheet, that data would still be there, because a lot of times companies need to keep their test data for either auditing purposes or traceability or what have you. So if I had data, these would still have all the data, and these would still have data, but it's simply color-coded. It says, guess what? This data is no longer used. And for the new fields, it would simply insert a column, color them green, and say, and these are fields that are new. So if you want to do a rollback and say, ooh, we're not going to, this has got too many glitches, we're going to go back to it, guess what? All of your test data still works. It's simply color-coded to show you what happens. But the idea is now you know, now you can automatically update the components, see what was changed within the application. You get a report. You get a report of all of the test cases that were affected, and guess what? They all get automated automatically because these are reusable components that are inherited, and it tells you here's where you need to change your test data. So we've had ROIs done on our maintenance mode and have shown that it can reduce your maintenance costs up to 70%. So the last thing we're going to look at is the fact that it is 100% QC compatible, so that it's fully integrated into the HP ALM platform. And FYI, we are solely integrated into HP. We do not work with Selenium or CompuWare or Rational or any of those other tools. But what it provides you is all of the power of the HP Foundation plus our scriptless testing. So by combining the power of HP platform with our solution, you get a tool, a utility, a solution that is component-based scriptless testing, will support manual automated load middleware testing, support cloud, mobile, agile, variety of delivery models. And so it's a utility or a solution that provides, in just a quick recap, ease of use, in that you're simply going to click on the screens to create components. You're going to use these components and simply drag and drop them to create the test cases. You're going to get a data-driven architecture that will read the Excel spreadsheets that will test all of your application logic within a single test case. And you will get the maintenance mode that allows you to very quickly update your existing components, identify the changes within the screens, identify the test cases that are affected, and illustrate or identify the changes in your test data. So what we really provide, what cFactory provides, is a dramatic reduction in the level of time, effort, and money, not only in creating your test cases, but in maintaining your test cases, providing you increased test reusability, more efficient resource utilization, and faster test cycles. So we'll open it up to questions.
Anna, did you get any questions?
Sorry about that. Yeah, we've received a few questions. I'll start with the first one. Can the components created by cFactory be edited or modified?
Absolutely. So while the components created are customized to your needs, there are times when you might want to add, for example, a function that you've created. So you can very easily add or modify these components. So what it will allow you to do is it creates these components that have all of your requirements in them, but also provides you the flexibility to modify them. Now, out of the box, the components are what are called keyword. In other words, it's simply 3 parameters: the name of the control, the action you want to take, and the value. So again, you don't need programming. So if there's a field on the screen, and what cFactory is doing is putting data into it, and what you want to do is make sure that, well, if it puts in, for example, a Social Security number, I want you to make sure that it formatted it correctly, so that it's 3-2-4. Guess what you would do? You would go into the component and say, Social Security field, verify, format. So it gives you all of the power without the programming. And of course, if you are comfortable with VBScript, then guess what? You can open those components in QTP and work with them at a low level as well. So the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay, great. And there's a couple more. The next one is, we have been using QTP for quite some time and have a large library of tests. If we bring on cFactory, what happens to the existing tests?
So what we do is we are 100% QTP Quality Center ALM compatible. And so you can retain your existing test cases and continue to leverage them. We don't want you to have to rip and replace. So if you've got test cases that are providing value, continue to use them. In fact, you can even mix and match QTP tests with cFactory tests so that you can leverage both technologies. And what we would recommend is, as the old technology, as the old QTP tests break over time, replace them with the cFactory components. So we don't want you to have to rip and replace. If you've got a library in place, continue to leverage it. What we'll do is we'll make the creation and maintenance of tests easier as we move forward.
Okay. And next one, what type of execution reports do cFactory tests create?
Well, remember, or actually it's not remember, I should point out, what cFactory is doing is creating the components and managing the data-driven infrastructure. All of the rest of the test execution, the test management, is done by the HP platform. So you're going to get your standard QTP run reports, and you'll get all of your dashboards and analysis from Quality Center. So again, this goes back to being 100% HP compatible. You don't lose any capability. So all of your reporting, your dashboards, your executive summaries, any customizations that you've done to your reporting in Quality Center, those are all still there and they all still work.
Okay, and the last one I see here is, how does cFactory handle middleware or database testing?
Okay, and again, this is based on our compatibility, in that cFactory is designed for automating applications. So it handles all of the user interface automation. You still have all the capabilities of Quality Center in that you can go in, and if you want to do a low-level SQL call or a middleware call, in fact, many HP customers are moving to the latest release of Quick Test Pro, which is now called Unified Functional Test, UFT, and it integrates an application that's called Service Test that allows you to do middleware testing and database testing. Mix and match those capabilities with the cFactory components. You can very easily test the user interface and the business logic using cFactory, and you can use the capabilities of both QTP and UFT to do your low-level testing.
All right. Steve, I see some more questions in the questions box here. The first question is, can you use multiple rule bases at once?
Well, so remember, the rules bases are used when you're creating the components. So the rules bases are embedded in the component. So what I would do is I'd say, okay, I've got a business process that starts on the web, goes to a terminal emulation, and then goes to SAP. Well, here's what I would do. I would load the rules base in in C Factory and learn the web application. Then I would load the terminal emulation rules base and learn the AS400. And then I would go in and load the SAP rules base and learn the SAP. And then I can drag and drop all those components into a single test so that I can do an end-to-end cross-application business process test. So I can say, hey, it comes in during the web, it gets processed on an AS400, then I do something in SAP, then there's a user exit to a Java application, and then I finally publish it on my portal. So you wouldn't actually use the rules bases simultaneously. You would use them to create the components, and then you can mix and match the components within a single test. Hopefully that answered that question.
All right. The next question is, can you use another data source instead of Excel?
Absolutely. Excel is just, the worksheets are just a repository that enables our data framework to function. But you can use all of the linking and external sourcing capabilities of Excel. So the data can come from an XML database. It can come from, you can say, extract these values from a copy of production, or I'm using a test data management tool like Goldmine, InfoShuttle, or TDMS, and I want you to go get the data from there. So the Excel is simply a repository for the data, and the data can come from anywhere.
All right, okay. The next question is, how does it handle Ajax pages? For example, when we add drivers to an insurance policy, we never leave the screen.
Well, so I know that we support Ajax. We've actually got technical support for it, but I'm not really sure what when we add drivers, we never leave the screen. So what can happen is, as you modify the screen, it can be active content, and controls and fields can appear and disappear based on the business process. What we do with C Factory is we will go in, and what we would do is we would teach it all of the various iterations of the screen. So we could say, you know, here it is with 12 controls, here it is with 19 controls, here it is with 100 controls. And that would be typically consolidated as a single component, so that even though we never leave the screen, it would know all of the different iterations of that screen. So it would say, oh, here's what happens when we add this kind of rider, or here's what happens when we add you know, another you know, service or function to this particular policy. So if you've got an application that runs off a single screen and the screen simply is changing content, that's the way we handle that.
Okay, all right. The next question is, in case we need to create a framework, we should still resort to coding in QTP and get a C Factory to work with that. So that's the question, asking if we should do some coding in QTP and get C Factory to work with that in case they're trying to set up some framework.
Well, here's the thing. C Factory is a framework. So the idea behind it is, you know, unless you are a company that specializes in software development, why do you want to build a testing framework that you have to maintain? The idea is that with C Factory, you've got a generic framework that will handle all of the applications you want to test and is maintained for you. However, if there are certain functions or capabilities that you would like to integrate into C-Factory or use with C-Factory, you can absolutely do that. And remember, C-Factory, all the components it creates are HP, QC, ALM, QTP compatible. So you can mix and match them, or you can actually take your scripting frameworks and create keywords and functions and import them into C-Factory and use them that way. So really, one of the things is we run into people who've created frameworks, and the thing is, well, you're an insurance company, you're a banking company. Why are you spending all this time and money to create a framework if we can do it for a fraction of the cost and totally eliminate all of the maintenance overhead? So either way you want to do it. If you want to integrate it into a framework, you can do it as long as it's written in, QTP, Quality Center, VB script, it'll work. Or you can simply let C-Factory do the work. So you can do it either way.
All right. The next question is, C-Factory uses the data-driven and keyword-driven frameworks and provides its own GUI to make automation testing scriptless. So he's asking clarification if that's how it works.
That's exactly how it works.
Good. How do we port the existing QTP scripts to C-Factory environment to facilitate the scripts to work?
Well, if you've got existing scripts, you would continue to use them as QTP scripts. Right now, there is no way to convert a QTP script into a C-Factory script. The reason being is that there's just simply too many different ways to script. Some people, so what we recommend is continue to leverage your existing scripts as they are, and as they require maintenance, instead of maintaining them with VB script, simply recreate them with C-Factory. Click on the screens and create your own components for those screens. So the answer is you can run them both, as long as the QTP scripts are working, and simply convert them over time. So again, it goes back to, we understand that, QTP's been around for 14 years, and there's people that have got these libraries that they've created. And what they're trying to get away from is all of the maintenance that's required to maintain these libraries. What we would recommend is a stepped approach where it's like, okay, let's bring in C-Factory, and any new testing that we're doing we'll do in C-Factory, and any test cases that have broken since the last iteration, rather than scripting them in VB script, we'll simply click, drag and drop to create them in C-Factory. So you can continue to leverage both, and it's simply a timed changeover to C-Factory. So unfortunately, there's no way to convert an existing QTP script to C-Factory, but since they work together, that's the methodology we recommend.
Okay. The next question is, what is the version of QTP and ALM needed to get C-Factory to work?
We'll work with anything 9 or above, but we recommend 11 as a minimum. A lot of that has to do with that QTP 11 and ALM 11 have performance enhancements for what's called BPT, business process testing. That's the component-based approach. So it'll work as far back as 9, but we would recommend the customers run 11 or above. Excuse me.
Okay, and there are a couple of questions about, is QTP the requirement? And obviously it is required to use C-Factory, right?
That is correct. We leverage QTP for two things. We're actually leveraging the QTP recognition engine, so that when you saw me using C-Factory and creating the components, QTP was running in the background. I mean, all I do is start it and minimize it. I'm not writing any VB script, but we're leveraging the technology in QTP. And then when the scripts run, or the test cases run, it's QTP that executes them. So for this solution to work, you need Quality Center, or ALM, and you need QTP, and you also need a copy of BPT inside of Quality Center so that you can use the drag and drop test case creation. So fortunately, now the neat thing about it is you only need BPT to create the test cases. So you do not need a copy of or a license of BPT for everybody, only for the people that create the test cases. And then after that, it's just Quality Center and QTP.
Cool. The next question is whether it supports API testing. cFactory supports API testing.
Remember, cFactory is based for user interface testing. If you want to do low level, then use, write script or use a service test. Again, you can mix and match it. You can take those API tests and convert them to a keyword. Most people that are doing API testing know how to do that. And you can just add that keyword library to cFactory so that you can drag and drop components and say, do this to the interface, do this to the interface, and then you can actually have a component that does a low-level test. So for example, you could say, all right, these 5 components are going to create an invoice, and then the 6th component is an API test that's going to go call the middleware and make sure that, that this invoice was properly submitted, that the database was updated, what have you. So while we don't directly support API or low-level testing, it can be integrated and created as a component or a keyword.
Good. The next question is how cFactory reacts when there's a defect in the application.
It reacts exactly the way QTP does. So you can tell it, here's a recovery scenario, or just fail the test and go to the next one, retry it so many times and then go to the next step. So all of the recovery scenarios that are available in QTP are available for cFactory.
Okay. The next question is how would the cFactory then update non-Excel sources when the page changes? I think this is in connection with the question that somebody asked about the Ajax pages. Michael Isaacson is the one who was having some questions around the Ajax pages. I think in relationship to that, he was asking this question.
So what you're going to do is you're going to have an Excel spreadsheet that will have all of the possible entry forms on it. And so what it would say is so it would say this form can have these 20 fields. You may only fill in one, so you just leave the rest of them blank. So those fields would be in the Excel spreadsheet. If you're not using them, you can hide them in the Excel spreadsheet, but it's simply like looking at a blank screen with a bunch of empty fields on it. And the way the data driver works, it says, if you give me data, I'll fill it in. If you don't, I'll skip it. So what the Excel spreadsheet would look like is it would say, here's the possible data inputs, and based on the scenarios that I'm using, for scenario 1, I fill in 4 of them. For scenario 2, I fill in 12 of them. So the data is there, and when it's updated, it will either add or delete the forms. If the data is coming from an external source, then you would simply need to update those links so that you would either say, I no longer need to import this data, or I now have a new field and I need to map this date field to my data source.
All right. I think there's one more question that came in. The object repository QTP won't recognize, then can cFactory do something on that side?
Yes. So obviously in order for, that's an excellent question. I'm glad that was brought up. So obviously in order for our methodology to work, one of the requirements is that we recognize all the objects on the screen. So for example, QTP supports SAP, the SAP GUI, wonderfully. But when you go to SAP Portal, because of the controls being dynamically named, it often fails on object recognition in SAP Portal. So for SAP Portal as well as other development environments or other application environments, we actually have add-ins for QTP that reinforce the object recognition. So we've got things for Cerner, or add-ins for Cerner, we've got add-ins for Flex, we've got add-ins for Portal applications, we've got add-ins for Oracle Java applications, so that remember what part of my presentation was, that we're application aware. So what we would do is, if a customer was interested in our application and they said, we've got an app and we've tried to automate it with QTP, but there are areas, there are objects that aren't recognized consistently or that it doesn't seem to be able to see, what we can do is what we call a technical evaluation, and we can take a look at it and very quickly identify whether QTP can be extended so that it accurately supports that object recognition, and we would provide that as part of the solution at no extra charge. So that is something that we are aware of and that do provide that for certain environments, whether it's Java or .NET or Cerner or SAP, there are enhancements that are required for QTP to be able to recognize those objects. We provide those as an add-in as part of the solution, so that if you were actually to bring up my copy of QTP and look at the add-ins, you would actually see, in addition to the standard, VB and Java and what have you, you would see add-ins called TKS Java, TKS Web, TKS SAP. Those are extensibility add-ins that we've created to make QTP work better in those environments.
The next question is, can we use cFactory without HPALM?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's a question that we already answered.
Yes.
All right. So this is an interesting one. So, Steve, do you say automation experts are no longer required?
Well, it depends on your testing. Here's the thing. Some automation experts are still needed for doing, it's depending on your level of automation. Do you want to do API calls? Do you want to do database validations? Do you want to do middleware testing? Then yes, you still need automation experts. But the majority of testing, especially when you take a look at ERP, CRM applications such as Oracle and SAP, over 90% of that testing is still done manually because companies are relying on subject matter experts and business analysts to do the testing. They would love to be able to leverage an automation tool, but they've been hampered by those hiccups that we showed. That record and replay doesn't really work very well, that maintaining the test cases becomes tedious. So what we've got here is a solution that is powerful enough. So if you've got a dedicated QA department, then what it's going to do is it's going to make them, 500% more efficient. But if so it works great if you've got trained QA people. But let's say that you don't have automation and you would like to move to automation, but you've been held back by all of the maintenance and technical overhead. Now we've got a solution that can give you, what you want in automation without all the technical overhead. So I'd like to say that it's a great tool if you've never done automation before and you want to do it well, or if you're an automation expert and you simply want to get rid of all of the scripting maintenance that you typically have to do. Because guess what? You still need somebody who can code to do an API call. But why should you have them spend a whole lot of time writing scripts to do simple automation of the UI interface? So we think our solution is great for both the beginning automator as well as the experienced automator.
Cool. The next question is, in the demo, we did not see anything related to verification. How will we do verification on cFactory?
Okay.
Like a logo exists or a button exists or a text exists. That's what the question is.
Well, it was just a matter of time. Typically, I like to do about a 90-minute demo in order to show all of the capabilities. In fact, a lot of the questions that were brought up are typically answered in the full demo. But inside the Excel spreadsheet, it works exactly the same way. So you've got a field, and obviously you can input data into it, but what if you want to capture what it says? What if you want to verify it? What if you want to make sure that, an icon is the right color or that a control is enabled? Guess what? You can go into that same field and say, okay, name. Here's the data I want you to enter. Here's the data I want you to capture. Here's the state that I want you to verify. So it works the exact same way. It will not only drive the application with data, it will also capture and verify. So any of the capabilities for verification that are available in QTP are available through the Excel spreadsheet, but without writing code. So I can say name field is enabled, name field all caps, name field populated. So all of those capabilities are there. So for anyone who's on the call who would like, a more in-depth demo, just contact IDEXL and arrange for it, and we'd be more than happy to have an in-depth presentation. Simply due to the time limitations, we did a little bit of web, a little bit of SAP, and a little bit of Oracle. We could definitely present it in an environment that you're specifically interested in and go more in depth. But yes, we absolutely do validations, verifications, and as well as capture data and pass data between components, test cases, and test sets. So for example, excuse me, I go in, I create an invoice. Well, guess what? I want to capture the delivery date and the invoice number and the total, because I need to use that data, and first I need to verify that is the price right, is the delivery date within 15 days, and is the invoice number formatted correctly. And then when the sales order formatted correctly, and then I'm going to use that to create the transfer docs, the invoices, and the bills. So yes, all of those capabilities are built in. We're about 5 minutes over the hour, so we probably need to wrap this up.
Sure, Steve. I think there are a few more questions. What I'll do is we can respond back to these questions offline.
Sure.
And I'll save the questions. And as a general note, all the participants, if you have any other questions, you have both my email address and Steve's email address in the invite that we sent out. So you can draft your questions and send them out to us. We'll be more than happy to answer. And as Steve said, if you want to do a full-fledged demo, and we'll be more than happy to do that as well, and understand your environment and your problem statement, and much more a customized solution that we propose that will be working for your environment. We will be more than happy to do that. All right, then, as a closing note, I would like to thank you all for joining us for this webinar. I know it's 5 minutes over the scheduled time, but you were patiently waiting for hearing through all the questions that you had them answered. And as I said, if you have any other questions, please do reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to do a one-on-one session with you and clarify all your questions. And we'll be more than delighted to support you in your automation initiatives. I think that's it for today. Thank you all for joining. Anything, Steve?
I just want to say thank you to IDEXL for hosting this, and thank you for all the attendees for your patience and excellent questions, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Bye.